I'm excited for the Corvette C8 for the wrong reason. Now, I know you're thinking, great, another Mopar, demon Hellcat fanboy who's just going to trash the new C8 before it even hits the streets. That's not what I'm here to do. So I'm going to ask you to loosen up those New Balances, maybe take a break from banging your girlfriend who's half your age, and just hear me out. Alright, so I couldn't help myself. I had to throw in at least one midlife crisis joke. You see that right there? It's a C7 Z06. My roommate's had one for probably 2 years now. I've gotten to experience the car, I've gotten to drive this one and several others, so I'm not just another Dodge guy trying to shit on the C8. I watched the C8 reveal recap, and I've been just kind of going through Instagram and Twitter and kind of seeing what people are saying and what they hate about the car already. And it basically sums up to Camaro taillights, mid-engine, knockoff Ferrari, can't tune, overpriced, should have been without a wing, and no manual. Now, most of these comments are made by people who can't afford a base model C5, but nonetheless, let's talk about it. Now, not even being a Corvette guy, I can already knock a lot of these right off the list. One of the hardest ones I think that actually makes sense is can't tune. Come on, you gotta think of something better than that. When GM says that they're putting an encrypted ECU, it only means it's gonna take a little bit longer for somebody to crack it. I remember when if you're familiar with jailbreaking your phone, when that was a big thing, a lot of the new iOSs came out like 11 and 12, and people were like, you're never going to be able to jailbreak it. iOS is going to be unjailbreakable. And what happened? If you go on the internet right now, you can get a jailbreak for the latest version of iOS. I know it's a little different with cars, but all it's going to take is a guy with a Corvette who knows the dealer or knows the mechanic and can get his hands on the tool I'm sure GM is going to make so that they can service the ECUs, and then he's going to make that technique or what he did readily available. Boom, you have tuning, and Hennessy and everyone else is going to be happy. Another easy one I can just knock right off, I don't even really want to touch on this, but is that it shouldn't have come with a wing. Now, you'll see the Stingray with the C7 didn't have a wing, same with the V6 Challengers. Every car company kind of does it a little bit different, and as you get into the higher models, like the Z06 and the ZR1, obviously, have the stage 2, the stage 3, and then the ZR Wing's a whole different story. This is the stupidest thing. This is going to be the easiest thing for aftermarket companies to do and should be the least of your concern when you're looking at the car. That gets rid of most of the hate, but I think two more things that I would knock off would be that it's a knockoff Ferrari and that it's mid-engine. Now, the only reason people are making the association that it looks like a knockoff Ferrari is because the Corvette obviously has never been in 7 generations a mid-engine car, and people are thrown off by that. People aren't happy. This kind of ties into the manual scenario, but we'll get to that in a second. And basically, all mid-engine cars do look the same. I know it kind of looks like that new SF90 or whatever Ferrari's latest and greatest prancing horse is. Obviously, it's going to be difficult for a car company to make a car that is mid-engine when the entire car for every single generation has been a front-engine car. I think they did a pretty good job. I don't think it looks that bad. I think it's one of those cars where it's going to have to grow on you a little bit, but I think they did a pretty good job considering that they've never done this before. Now, we just got rid of about 4 things, and the next thing I want to touch on is that it's overpriced. Now, you are paying $60,000 for a Stingray. That's going to be the super base model. I don't know when they're going to release the Z06 or the ZR1. I can only imagine those climbing into the 120 plus range, only because the MSRP for the ZR1 started at 120. So I have no doubt that these things are going to climb up there, or some ZR1 owners are going to be a little pissed off. Maybe they just did that. They're going a new way. You know, it's a different car, and they're going to make them a little cheaper. But you got to think that Hellcat started at right around the $65,000 range, and that was for their top-of-the-line car, not a base model that doesn't even have leather seats. And with the Stingray being the base model starting at about $60,000, it might piss some people off. And before everyone in the comments, every single keyboard warrior right now goes in and goes, well, Hellcat can't turn. I can't see Hellcat on the track. This is Stop. You can actually continue your comment if you actually race someone on a track in your car. Where does most racing go on? Stoplights, the highway, roll racing. When are you driving on the street, you see another car and you go, oh yeah, I'm going to see if I can race them around this corner and through this neighborhood because we both know where to go. That's not how it works. Unless you're the autocross champion of your local city, I don't think you should be commenting about how it does better on the track when most racing that the average person does is, straight line. Let's roll from this number and let's see what our cars can do. All ranting aside, there's two things I left on the board, and that would be the Camaro taillights and no manual. Starting with the Camaro taillights, I completely agree. It looks like a Camaro. Chevy doesn't really know what it's doing with its rear ends, and especially its front ends. If you've seen the Camaro, the decline, and possibly it being discontinued. I'm not going to talk about that anymore, but I definitely think the rear end looks like a Camaro, and they maybe should have changed it a little bit, but, it's a first run. Maybe they'll make some adjustments. The aftermarket community might be the solution, because I don't know if they're actually going to change it, but it might be just one of those things where it has to grow on you. If you remember the Escalade taillights when they first came out, I was not a fan, but later down the line, actually seeing them on the road, I kind of got adjusted to them, and once you got used to them, and you look at the old taillights, you go, oh, it wasn't that bad, and they look kind of cool. Now, the last thing on the list is obviously the most difficult, probably the most controversial, would be the no manual. Now, I understand why they're doing this. I kind of like the style of, the Huracan gear selector, like how it's not the traditional with something you actually pull for an automatic or put into gear. It's just pushing buttons and feels a little bit more futuristic. You got to take into account this is the C8, this is a new car, they're trying new things, and they might not be as familiar as the regular Corvette, but they're going, obviously it's a completely different car now. I understand why they're doing it when you look at manual transmissions versus automatic. I have an automatic myself. Yes, I have a few manuals on the side, but at the end of the day, the automatic shifts faster than you can think, so it's a no-brainer if you want a faster car. I think they should have made an option available, maybe whatever they need to cover their ass for producing another transmission and fitting it through the dashboard and the new interior components. I don't know how the actual components are inside the car and where the transmission sits, but I think they should have made it an option just because you're still wanting to go after the traditional Corvette crowd, and a lot of those guys really enjoy manual transmission. It makes you feel more connected to the car. A lot of guys are going to pick that, but I see what they're doing. I see the direction they're going, and I'm not upset about the automatic, but I know a lot of people are. If you're still here, you might be still wondering why a Dodge guy is making a video about a Corvette C8. I like to think of myself as unbiased. Everyone has their preference. Everyone has the car that they like. It's not that I don't like the C8. Obviously, it's not my personal preference, but what I really like about the C8 and what it's making me excited is what it's going to do to Dodge. Now, to be a little more clear on that, I think that this is going to inspire Dodge to go after the mid-engine market. I think they're waiting for Corvette, see what they do. Obviously, the Viper had to be discontinued. It wasn't doing as well as it used to. They needed a change up, and seeing Corvette take this new direction only makes me excited, because if this does well in the market and is actually received well and people like it, Dodge is going to try to go after a mid-engine Viper. The original Viper in 1991 was originally going to be a mid-engine. They went and made a concept, they went and did it, and I guess it just didn't feel like a real muscle car. It didn't feel like the traditional, front-engine car. It felt more foreign, especially even now people are going against the mid-engine in the new Corvette, so you can assume that back then, so when you're in the early 90s, cars are ugly anyways, but the last thing you would expect would be a domestic company to make a mid-engine car. Now, I know you're thinking 13 years or so right after the Viper came out, the Ford GT was released. It was the remake of the GT40, and it did really well. I think the Viper at that time was already so successful that they didn't feel the need to actually change it. Now, with the new direction being mid-engine and how the Viper was discontinued, they would need a significant change to actually bring the car back, and I think the C8 is the push that Dodge needs to actually make that car happen. But what do you guys think? I would love to see a mid-engine Viper personally. I'd like to see Dodge's take on this whole mid-engine thing, but do you guys think this is just a phase? Do you think mid-engine cars are going to be the new wave for modern sports muscle cars, some of the top-tier cars? Obviously, we already have the Ford GT in that ring, and do you think everyone's going to have to adapt over? Or do you think this is just a phase that's not going to end well, not going to be received well, and it's just going to die out? Comment your thoughts down below. Don't forget to drop a like on this video. Thank you guys for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.